Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Our Soft Machine.
Hold on, I thought I got to do the intro this time.
Did you want to do the intro this time?
Yeah, what do you have over here?
It's my sticky note with my intro.
All right.
Alright, take two.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Our Soft Machine, the podcast on mental health in the everyday. You can find us, you can read the rest of that.
I'm Andrew, and
I'm Sebastian.
you can find us most everywhere podcasts are available. Or you can reach us also at Twitter with comments, questions, concerns. At Our Soft Machine is our handle. How's that?
That was pretty good. Today's episode is...
Wait.
Oh.
Enough intro. Sebs, what are we talking about today?
Oh, right.
Now you may continue.
Thank you. By the way, I think I want to be like more legitimate podcasts since we've grown so much in the double digits, and have our intro song play after our intro, and it should fade in right about now. Okay, welcome back from the intro song. Today is episode 2, and our topic is episode 1. That's right, it's the meta episode. This is the sweet spot of podcasts, in-jokes, references, callbacks. It's going to be great. And you guys are in on it. Wait, what does your sticky note say? Oh, right.
It doesn't say anything.
Today's they don't know that. Today's episode is continuing our discussion, our general discussion. And that is, last time we asked, what is mental health? And today we ask, what is mental illness?
It's almost like a part 2, or like a volume 2, kind of.
Yeah.
Like a yin and yang almost. You know, you can't have health without really defining what illness is.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, so one is begetting the other naturally. And so, why don't you start us off? I mean, you are the one who wanted to do the mental health, mental illness topic, which is, I mean, it's absolutely relevant. So, but you know, this is your ball game.
Oh, okay, cool. Well,
take it away.
Thank you. I have a question for you.
I may have an answer.
You handed it to me. I'm gonna ping pong it right back. So
That's not how
when mental illness. So one thing I noticed when I typed "what is mental illness" in the Google 5 minutes ago
is that you're diagnosed with several.
No, it corrected me. It says mental disorder, also called mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
So might I ask, what am I supposed to be saying?
Honestly, that's a good question. So, in my line of work, I refrain from using illness or disorder just because of the negative connotations that come along with it. While it's fine for clinical use, in the everyday, you know, you're going to hear people kind of just be a little shy to use it or shy to really discuss it when you hear mental disorder, mental illness. So I like to say, honestly, like, maybe like a mental health concern. It sounds a little more colloquial. It doesn't sound quite as serious, even though it can be, you know, because a concern is really whatever you make of it. You know, what concerns me doesn't necessarily concern you. And even though we may be concerned about the same thing, we may be concerned at different levels.
I did notice in the last episode that you were using the term syndrome several times. But I don't know if that was just because it was some nice alliteration with your little saying of we're treating symptoms and not the syndrome.
Way to give away my my tips and tricks. But yes, I am a fan of alliteration.
Trying to make mental health catchy here, people.
Andrew is allured to alliteration.
Nice.
So
there's
my secret.
There wasn't any real like big meaning behind you using the word syndrome then.
Not really.
Okay.
Honestly, it's not really even like a word that's used as much in mental health. It's really more of a blanket term.
Okay.
If anything.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really mean anything, to be honest. It's just a collection of symptoms and we just slap syndrome on it just to say like, hey, it's a thing. It's like saying dermatitis. You know, you have itchy skin, red skin. I don't know what you have, but the collection of things means you have an issue with your skin. So you have dermatitis.
So what you're saying is that
mental health is a dermatitis of the mind. I'm a big fan of the simplest solution. It's probably the most correct one. Occam's razor. So.
Okay. So your mental weakness, let's talk about, illness. So actually this one might get a little bit more personal today. Because in talking about...
Can I just say, I like how your notes are just like the return page for Google.
Literally, it's what is mental. I may have been a little underprepared for this episode.
Here, I'll make you feel a little better. Hopefully,
thanks.
No one is quite prepared for mental health.
Illness, concern.
Yes.
Okay.
Weakness.
Thank you. Well, okay. So basically, the way I was going to approach today's episode is probably diving a little deeper. That's what that means. Into us and why we're doing this, to whatever extent that you feel comfortable with.
Okay.
So,
because real quick, we did touch on that a little bit last time, but I think we mostly had a direction of trying to just emphasize hope and conversation, not as much into ourselves as we could have been.
Yeah, exactly. And what our demographics out of our 14 listeners is saying is that that's what people are looking for, a little bit more realness. So
this is research.
This is
data.
Exactly.
We have it on you. Welcome to 2018.
So, also, I also learned in the last episode, I like using the term absolutely a lot. So there will be a lot less of that.
Okay. Whatever floats your boat, man. I think one of the things, though, I would like to also explore real quick is mental illness, like I said, comes with a lot of baggage, the word, the idea. And I think there's a really cool movement that has always kind of been around, not as prevalent as it could be, but it's getting more steam now, especially with organizations in Texas, of all places. But what it is this idea of empowerment is taking back not necessarily the idea of mental health, but the personalization of it. Whereas, before it was more medical, where one thing led to another and so on and so forth, with a straight line. Now we're trying to take it back. I think it's a good thing. That's why I tell people mental health, illness, disorder, whatever you want to call it, I'm not going to use those words. It's all up to you, because you get to define it, honestly. And really ties in well into how you were saying, diving into us.
Sorry. Okay. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. Yeah. So I guess let's get to it. Let's talk about me.
Go.
All right. So, for me, mental...
I'm sorry, our session's up.
Shoot. It's $140.
140? Where are you going?
What I like here is definitely... it's not a contest. But if it were, Andrew would be winning. I definitely am far less concerned than he is. I was going to say messed up. But
Thank you for sparing me.
Yeah. But that's the idea. You don't need cancer to go see a doctor. It can just, you can go in for, a cough, and that's kind of like what I had, something that was small, but persistent, like a persistent cough, something that was concerning and affected me in my everyday life, with my relationships, with my family, with my jobs. It eventually creeped its way into things. Now it's, you'll have to remind me of the term. You probably know it. I forget it at this time, but essentially it's like this sort of, very persistent low depression. I think it's called
chronic.
I
can never say the word. Dysthemia, dysthemia.
I think dysthymia.
I can. It's correct. Like it's. I can never pronounce it, but yeah, it's basically a low grade chronic depression, whereas there's like the more common acute depression, I guess you can say, that people get, but both have their own standards, their own. But yeah, there's. We can call it a low grade persistent chronic depression. Yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially what I had, and again,
this will be actually whatever you.
When I learned that there was a term or a label, kind of embarrassed at this point how excited I was that there finally was a name for what I had. But at the same time, I think it is a bit relieving and validating to learn that there is something out there that's been observed. So that means it's treatable, recoverable.
And, you raise a really good point, because there are a lot of people who find a lot of comfort in giving it a name and knowing that it's something relatively tangible. It's no longer this vague, amorphous idea, but now it's something you can research. Now it's something you can get some answers on.
Yeah, it's no longer a boogeyman. It's a dragon I can slay, And
a lot of people, there are people who really enjoy that, and then there are people on the other fence who are saying, well, it is what it is. It doesn't matter. Like, the symptoms are still there. So that's where the empowerment and the owning of it really comes into play. I'm not going to say, disregard or take into account or accept the diagnosis. I think it's something very personal. For example, I am a little in the middle. I like to know that there is something there I can research and have a name for. But at the same time, after so long, I am also in the way of thinking that's not going to mean anything, because what I find isn't necessarily going to be me anyway. I really have to look for me for the answers. So, but not to take away again from having a name for it.
No, it's okay. I feel bad about it now.
Sorry, I slayed your dragon for you.
It's you're right. It's personal. And no, I understand your view completely. So. Again, just because this is the way I am, the way I like to view it, this would fall under a general category of what you would call mood disorder. And typically, I guess most things we'll probably talk about. The approach is generally, my approach has generally been, I think it's called behavioral cognitive therapy, something like that. Mm-hmm. And eventually, after about a year and a half of therapy, going to see a psychiatrist and getting on the medication after a couple tries. Luckily, my journey's been fairly easy. For some people, it will be really difficult. It did take way too long. I'd known my partner since high school, and having battled it at that age, around, I think it was our sophomore year that we met, she had already kind of battled with it and seen therapists at that point. And had a very supportive family that recognized this in her. She saw it in me, and it was quite the struggle to finally get me to go see somebody. Part of it was financial, part of it is a aversion to change, and part of it is, of course, admitting a problem. I think I think it's almost like how we handle physical sickness sometimes. If there is something very chronic in us, we kind of want to pretend that the cough will go away. The blood in our stool is, just an oddity. And you hear about that all the time. People ignore something and it ends up being this bigger thing, and it's so much harder to tackle at that point.
And to stretch on that or continue on that, diabetes is the one I use a lot when I compare it to mental health, because for a lot of people it becomes such a normal that they don't feel there's anything wrong, because it is kind of something that creeps up on you over time, and you just don't realize it's more until someone tells you hey, these levels aren't normal, but you've been living with it for who knows how long, that it's kind of become your normal.
Yeah.
That's how I describe it. A lot of people you talk to who have diabetes will say they feel fine. Same thing with high blood pressure. They're just oh, nothing's wrong with me. I feel fine. Why would anyone why would I think otherwise? Well, these numbers and this data information is saying otherwise, but okay,
Yeah.
It's you're gonna know yourself best until you're ready to accept that maybe the numbers aren't lying. And again, this is just speaking to like medical.
Right. Yeah. No. And it's amazing what word review of normal you can have. So talking about the barriers to it, for me, I kind of bought into, I came from divorced parents, but I still saw my dad. And I kind of bought into, for him, he would see this in me, or maybe I tried to talk about it, but more than him knowing about it, what really resonates and echoes in my mind was his solution. And that was that I was not keeping busy enough. I was not working enough. Idle hands or idle minds are the devil's plaything. Basically it was borderline. There is no such thing as depression. And, for some background, both of my parents are from Mexico. And I think from other people that I've talked to, there's a fairly common perception in Mexican culture. You grew up with Mexican parents too. I mean,
I did.
And I don't know if that was your experience as well.
It was.
Yeah. So
their solution was not only be busy, but also go see a priest.
Yeah.
Little did they know that the priest was part of the problem. Well, not.
Whoa.
No, the priest was not the problem, but what he stood for, as in religion and God, was the problem.
Okay.
Gotta watch my phrasing.
That was a little teaser for a future episode on PTSD. Oh my gosh, I'm probably gonna take that out. All right. Anyway,
no, I think it's so. I am not opposed to leaving that stuff in, only because if you haven't caught on already, we've been a little more jovial, more humorous this time around, as opposed to the last episode, which was our first episode. We were introducing ourselves, getting used to this. Now we're a little more comfortable, and we even talked about how you said you use humor as almost like a defense mechanism. I absolutely use humor as it. Every day I'm joking.
That was a private conversation.
And yet I made it public. Okay. And so I think humor is very much a tool. It can be a handicap, it can be a crutch. I think it's one of those things that I can take back to use on my own, because what I do with a lot of people that I talk to, I use humor to make them laugh. I joke around about the things that we experience because I like sardonic, self-deprecating humor.
Huh.
That's just me, though. I know it's not for everybody.
Yeah, definitely, because I use humor to make people feel bad. Generally, I make fun of them.
Mm.
Yeah.
You should not.
Oh.
That's generally not accepted. While on this end, it's tricky because a lot of people like to read into jokes. And for record's sake or whatever, it's cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
CBT. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was my issue, and
we
the other one,
cultural components for sure.
Yeah, the other one was not so much like this one. I don't know really has like as much of a label as much as just a generalized thing, but on one of my really early like notes that my mom gave me from when I had school counselors that I'd never seen before, it was bizarre. One of them said like emotional disturbance, which seems really hardcore, but generally what they were describing was I was a very angry child and teenager and adult. Anger followed me for a long time until about my mid-20s. It was always like stabling off, but man, like when I was like in middle school, I mean, I remember like, I got in fights, I hit people. I mean, luckily that really didn't progress, but early on into our relationship with my partner, I was a yeller because that was how things happened in my household. People yell at each other. If you're mad, it's expected you yell. Now when we have a disagreement, it would be like you and I are talking right now, literally, like at this volume, level, and tone. And when I get guys asking me like, man, how do you do that? I tell them like, kind of tongue in cheek, but I'm actually very serious. Years of therapy, that's pretty much what it's been. A really hard one for me to overcome was, it's commonly called road rage. and I wouldn't get out of my car and like confront anyone, but I was a honker, tailgater, all that, and slamming on my wheel. And basically my therapist just kind of asked me like, hey, when you get in the car, do you think other people like get in the car thinking like, I'm going to go piss off Sebastian today? Well, no, that's ridiculous. Okay, so then why do you get in the car thinking that you're going to teach anyone a lesson? Best case scenario, they know what they did, you honk at them, you get mad, and they don't care because they did it. Why would they care? They wouldn't do that behavior in the first place.
That's an idea that you can apply to a lot of situations, not just road rage.
And then worst case scenario, just to finish the thought, is the person's completely confused. Like, they have no clue why this person's going off on them because it was a mistake. And if you don't allow for mistakes, your anger is going to control you. Other people's behavior is going to control you. And man, I used to be unsurprisingly so angry at that thought that, well, if you let them make you angry, they win. They're controlling your emotions. And I thought, no, they just need to be taught a lesson. It's a fruitless endeavor, by the way. Anyone who's thinking like that. Not that any young people will listen to me. I heard it all the time.
You're not going to really understand it until you kind of go through it in your own way.
Yeah.
I am very much familiar with that in alcoholism. So I understand. I will remember DARE.
Yes.
We had a DARE program that tried to teach us the dangers of drugs. And that was just one of many attempts. But we're not really like, we recognize that these things happen or they're bad, but it's not really going to sink in until we really get into the shit of it. My being the DWI and the time I spent in jail and the year of stress and money. So, and just a lot of self-reflection until I realized, like, shit, this is what they were warning me about. This is what I was actually seeing in other people. It's what I was seeing in my father. So it's going to take a kind of rock bottom. I mean, it's going to be different for everybody on different levels.
Yeah.
So what your therapist was kind of saying is also, I think, good to almost also apply to like social situations. I was someone, and in a way I still am, someone who will go immediately or easily to the negative thought where I feel like someone thinks something negatively of me or sees me in a bad light in some way or another. And really, I don't know that they're not. I don't know that they are. But I'm allowing myself to put that idea in place of them, I guess. So what I'm saying is I'm basically allowing myself to be controlled by an idea. And if I were to really approach social situations with the idea that if someone said a specific something, instead of assuming or going straight to the idea that they said that to spite me or to have a slight at me or something, maybe instead just approach it with like, well, with the benefit of the doubt, give it to them that they said it out of ignorance, not out of malice. And it takes practice, but it makes things a lot easier because you do feel a little more relaxed. I felt a lot more relaxed when I let people just say what they say for the sake of saying it and not considering it as anything more. Whereas in the past, I would quickly and easily say, like, do you hate me? Or like, and I would think these things and they would just eat at me. And I quickly shut down. So.
Yeah, for me, I mean, for me, it was like, I don't care if it's stupidity or malice. Either one has to be corrected. And what a flawed view of either one. Because malice isn't going to care, no matter, how much you put into your words. And
stupidity doesn't know any better.
Yeah, or at least there's a chance they will, but not if you're yelling at them. People shut down. People close off. Anger is,
it gets itself.
Yeah, it's funny. I could notice the pattern that anger would not get me what I wanted if I really thought about it. And it feels so good. I was almost addicted to it. There's this rush to it. And I think that's how a lot of my low-grade depression manifested itself. For other people, like my girlfriend, she found healthier outlets. She's a runner. She runs. She goes on a run.
Hence a runner.
Yeah, but exercise is a very good outlet, and
Running may not be for everybody, but hey, have you tried biking?
I bike,
Have you tried boxing?
Actually, well, not boxing. There's this thing at 20. Yes, I'll just say yes.
Some sort of fighting.
Some sort of fighting.
But
yes.
but productive, proactive fighting.
Don't join your local fight club.
You've said too much already.
Tyler Durden was a flawed character, okay?
He really was. And the book itself is very often misquoted, misinterpreted.
Yeah.
So, I when I was younger, I did Taekwondo. And that actually taught me a lot of self-control. And I also did have an outlet for hitting people. Because I was allowed to spar. And that's actually how I quickly also learned I have very little remorse or empathy for hurting people. Physically, at the very least. Just because I would make people cry or hurt and just walk away like, well, it was their fault. And I wouldn't care. And that's one of those behaviors that I had to learn to correct. That I know it wasn't okay. And that sounds borderline sociopathic. But that's a conversation with my therapist. Leave me alone. So...
Yeah, but okay, getting back to the idea though,
that was about me.
So what makes this a mental disorder?
Well, I have a definition.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's go with that first.
Yes, this is from NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. A mental illness is a condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, or mood. Such conditions may affect someone's ability to relate to others and function in each day. Each person will have different experiences, even people with the same diagnosis. I think it's a pretty good description of it. It's not implying that there's something wrong with you. I think it's trying to lend itself to just saying that, hey, something's not quite right. And I think I can't think of anyone who would argue being angry or depressed all the time is like, it's just you. I don't think anyone would say that. And I also don't think anyone should be on the other end of the spectrum saying like, oh, you should stop being that. You should try being happy. Because that is not in any way, shape, or form effective. Because if you could, you probably would have already. Or if you knew how, you wouldn't be feeling this discomfort.
Even you bringing up that phrase, try being happy, as an example, just makes me upset. Not angry. I've gotten over that.
Irked?
Irked. Perturbed.
I've had someone tell me you're not depressed, and that put me off for a very long time to try to do anything about it. I almost felt gaslighted. Just because... Or gaslit? No. But because I was like, well, maybe I'm not depressed. Maybe I'm just like... I'm a teenager, and I'm going through this. Well, now I'm in college, and I'm kind of going through it. I don't think this is normal. And it bothered me. But I found my own unhealthy ways to cope with it.
Yeah. For me, it was a string of failed relationships. And don't get me wrong, breaking up is normal. That is, people drift apart. People have differences. What I mean is the way I processed the breakups. They were incredibly bitter, completely burnt bridges, way over the top in reaction for me. And usually I was generally the catalyst for the breakup because my behavior would, again, my depression would manifest itself, and understandably, I really can't hold it against this person who did not understand me or what was going on, and I would feel very upset about that. But for them, this was a completely abnormal behavior, for what was going on in our relationship. And then it's small things in the everyday, and it's hard because people will call you, well, they'll tell you that you're lazy, you lack discipline, and, certain things, they do require practice. Setting up routines has been especially hard for me.
It's one of the most interesting and I think motivational quotes I've read, and it was on a shirt, which makes it immediately, like, it feels like it discredits it almost immediately. But self-discipline is the vehicle for joy. Yes, establishing routines is not easy, and it takes a level of self-discipline. But when you practice anything, you tend to get better at it. And there is a level of self-discipline that I think a lot of people don't take into account and just immediately will give you like an inherent or like you're intrinsically broken approach.
Yeah. Just as a note, you can practice something the wrong way.
Yes, you can.
just so you know, like that has been studied when they were trying to look at the 10,000 hour theory. You will learn something very well, but you may learn the wrong way of doing it very well.
Coping skills are a good example of that.
Yeah, you know, alcohol. That can be a routine. I know very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's hard to get it out of my mind. I mean, on the outside, something especially like low-grade depression just looks like, it can look like someone, and it very much, I had myself convinced that I was just this worthless, lazy person, and that's why I acted or didn't act, rather, in the way that I do or did. And I think that was definitely a hindrance in pursuing recovery, or at least treatment, I should say. And it's funny, when I was listening to the other one, I was editing the last one, I remember you saying something about, at the time of around ADHD or ADD, some parents were saying, you know, oh, we need to like beat or hit our kids, spank our kids. And, you know, we're not hardening our kids enough, you know. I've heard a common thing with me with a certain type of person, and I'll let you guess what type of person from what I'm about to say is, you know, man, you know, guys like you could really use the army, you know, some discipline, some work, some routine. And like, I just want to tell them like, A, do you think there may have been like an emotional driven choice for you to join the army? And B, how do you not look at someone like me? I mean, if you had met me like 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even made it through like whatever, like, I guess mental wellness test, if they even have one for that.
They don't. I asked the recruiter.
Really?
I did. Okay. And yeah. I think I stumped him with the question because he looked at me very confused and was like, no. I was like, oh, okay. I'll keep on doing my thing, I guess, and you do your thing, which was signing people up.
Yeah.
And you know, in the last couple of years, and actually several decades, you've seen a lot of PTSD, obviously, coming out of the military. But maybe there can be something to be said for a sort of wellness check going in, because you can't predict how these situations are going to shape/shift a person.
Shaped.
Yes. That's uncomfortable shaping.
Yes. Just like we're diving into us.
These are all real words, people.
Diving deep. So yeah, that's and you know, again, that's so that, you know, basically depression is what we have, and that would fall under mood disorder. And I think for you,
me,
I don't know if I remember last time you talked about anxiety.
Yeah, definitely. Anxiety was so I am not unfamiliar with panic attacks. I have had them badly enough to warrant a very rash decision to go to the emergency room. That was unpleasant. So I think if had I gone a different route, I probably would have gone to elsewhere, i.e. psych ward. But that's not also the first time I've been kind of threatened with that idea. But I've definitely had just a shit ton of anxiety about mannerisms, social etiquette, empathy and sympathy. I don't always feel like I understand it. I don't always feel like I get it, and I don't always feel like I can like give it. So I'm not always good at reading cues or even saying the appropriate thing. And then that coupled with the idea that I always feel someone was immediately saying or thinking something negatively about me. Like it doesn't make for a good combination. So I naturally ran to alcohol sometimes to make me social, or what I thought other people expected instead of what I expected for myself. And those were the two big ones. But I have struggled myself personally with eating disorders, addiction, relationships for sure, general mood disorderliness, I don't know, conditions, concerns. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about when you have a name for it, it can definitely empower some people. And it did for a little while. But then with my own personal research and education, mood disorders, I think, is just as fine a diagnosis, honestly, because it's such a variety, it's such a wide net where things like anxiety fall into depression, mania, which is the exact opposite of depression, but you don't see people getting diagnosed with being too happy. Apparently that's not a thing. But these things are mood disorders, and that's how I see it. I see it as a mood disorder, not necessarily depression, because I was always questioning whether or not I was depressed or anxious. I didn't want to be both. And I realized, well, they kind of beget each other. I'm depressed because I'm anxious. I'm anxious because I'm depressed. Or maybe I'm too depressing for other people or something. Or I'm not going to say the right thing or do the right thing. So that's a big part of me. And it really did just kind of start with family, where nothing was always right. And I actually want to say something real quick, because I happened to actually find this article today that touches on childhood trauma. There is something called ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences.
Huh.
And they're surprisingly relevant in so much that you can see a strong correlation between people's scores and their current mental state, or how they perceive their mental state. And it's not hard to guess, really. The higher the score, the worse you, technically, quote unquote, the worse you are now.
So it's kind of like golf.
Yes, you don't want a high number. So, exactly. We're playing golf with mental health, and people don't know it, or just don't realize it. There's definitely a link. It started in the 90s, and it's been kind of growing. And just think of it this way. It can stretch anywhere from having anxiety amongst family to having sexual inappropriateness in family, or, viewing traumatic events as a child. It's a variety of things that would generally be adverse. But it kind of leads into thinking like, well, maybe there's something going on here that we're not addressing well enough into adulthood that is manifesting itself in one way or another. And, this article was specifically about minorities, and I think there is definitely something to be said about that. I mean, we said it in a way where we have a huge cultural component behind ours. These ACE scores, ACE studies weren't primarily done with minorities at first. They were done with, your general white public or population. But you have a level of culture where you can't ignore, because whether it's a white population or not, there is still some level of culture and society norm that dictates behavior. And minorities were not always as forthright with it, especially because with Mexican Hispanic cultures, depression is not a thing. So we're not going to go out in front and say it.
That's really interesting about the ACE scores. I was going to ask if you wanted to get a little bit more into the article itself.
Okay, so the study finds 3 of 5 adults across the U.S. had at least one adverse experience in their childhood, such as divorce, a parent's death, physical or emotional abuse, or a family member's incarceration or substance abuse problem. In my case, it would be family member's substance abuse problem, emotional, I wouldn't say abuse, but not a proper, what would you say, something that isn't handled. Emotional growth? I don't know. Poorly managed emotional growth. So, a quarter of adults have had at least 3 experiences in childhood. So, it increases, risk for common diseases, anywhere from chronic diseases to heart diseases to cancer to depression and substance abuse.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for these ACE scores, I think. And there's an awkward picture of a little kid in a onesie opening a door to what I'm assuming is the bedroom of his parents.
He's got like little bear hairs on his head.
It's a bear onesie.
So, yeah.
And it's actually, right here it says link between trauma and health. And it really is no big secret. Stress is probably the one thing that I think people don't consider as much mental health as they probably should. And you hear about all this shit that stress can cause on a person. You have a heart attack, you have a stroke, they tell you to cool it.
Yeah.
Reduce your stress levels.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the damage that shit is causing physically. Now imagine what it's doing mentally. ACE scores, look them up. Actually, there's a lot of tests online you can take to do your own ACE scores.
Mental health, it can be fun.
And I think I scored at a borderline that was just like, well, maybe you could, maybe you couldn't be kind of like in this category. And that was really because it's self-reported data. And self-reported data is notorious for not being the most reliable, but it is easy to get. So you kind of have to also consider that.
Yeah, so, go online, take a test, share it to your Facebook, let your friends know.
Share it to our Twitter. Again, our handle at our soft machine. And we'll share it with the world.
Actually, yeah, and you can, I'll just wait until the end for that. Actually, no, yeah, actually, and you can also find us on Facebook, and you can listen to us on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about this.
You did not know that, which it'll probably be more useful for me to say that somewhere else. Because if you're listening to us somewhere else, then you're not doing it on YouTube. And then if you are on YouTube, then you already know.
We did say this episode was going to get pretty meta.
Yeah. Okay. So,
you're wrinkling my brain.
But sticking with the childhood thing, my only exposure to anxiety was actually my partner, and it was more of a kind of a manifestation, because for her it's a little bit more internalized, because even when things are going very well, she can have quite the abundance of anxiety. She tells me about this habit she had when she was a kid, where she would bang her head against the wall, like not violently to where she would bleed or anything, but just she'd kind of thump her head against the wall. I think as a form of self-punishment, she would put herself in the timeout. So a lot of guilt that kind of went hand in hand with this anxiety disorder, if you will. So definitely it's far more than what I went through, and that was how it manifested itself in her childhood. And she's come a long way. For me, one of the stressors that I didn't really give enough credit to, my parents' divorce, because the way I viewed it was honestly constantly just in the view of the event itself. I don't recall the event itself really having that much of an impact on me, or me being too emotionally invested in it. I was like 6 years old, and I was still pretty, like, I don't know, numb. I've never been an emotional person. It's been tough for me in that regard. People can think I'm disingenuous, or I don't care about things. And sometimes, it makes me question what I'm feeling. But that said, my therapist kind of said, like, well, no, think of it in more than in those terms. Like, what kind of happened after that? What was the result, and what happened? And so as I explored through my childhood about what it ended up causing, like growing up in a single mom household, things were a little bit tough, in a rougher neighborhood. I moved around a lot as we were trying to afford places, went from school to school. And it's finally started to dawn on me, like, I was not giving my childhood enough credit as far as how much it affected me as an adult. Which I know sounds silly, but I don't know. I think there's this big, what am I trying to say? I think there's a big draw to denial, for the lack of a better phrase. Not even being a Mexican, I think being an American, I'd like to think that I paved my own path, and what's behind me is behind me. And, and that's what I learned in therapy was, I'm not too concerned about necessarily how I got here. I just know this is where I am, and now I need to decide how to move forward. But sometimes not addressing things in your past can definitely hinder that,
progress.
Sometimes definitely not addressing things can hinder that progress of moving forward.
It's a bit of a tightrope walk, because you can definitely, I definitely think I'm someone who feels that whatever happened in the past, is now in the past, can't do anything about it, and it's just kind of moving forward. But it also is worth revisiting. But then it's tricky because, when is revisiting wallowing, or when is revisiting, reading too much into, or just when is also the moment when you say, okay, I've accepted that and I'm a better person for it. Or it's just, it's tricky. And sometimes I think, especially through therapy, it's good to have someone that can help kind of guide that or facilitate that a little bit. I'm someone who is very stubborn, so I bounce all that kind of stuff off my therapist, but I do also recognize that I do it a lot on my own. And you're saying, you were young and you were kind of relatively detached from it. I remember one of my first memories was like crying so heavily at being left at daycare. Like even for the symbolism and everything of it, actually, because like my mom had dropped me off and I was freaking the fuck out. I was crying. I didn't want to stay. She was leaving. I didn't know she was going to come back. And there was literally a fence in between us. So, and I know that was hard for her. I'm the firstborn. So ever since that, I definitely did grow a level of anxiety, I think, that can be traced to that. But it's now, what do I do with that information? That's the tricky part, I think.
Man, it's so funny that you're talking about that, because
it's hilarious.
Well, it's kind of like, hearing about the time someone got hit in the crotch, It's pretty, it's kind of funny. It's not funny.
It's funny for everybody else.
Funny, yeah.
But for the guy who experienced it, maybe, like, yeah, I remember that pain.
But no, you just reminded me of these really intense memories that I actually haven't really thought about until now. And that is when I started, there's kind of definitely this distinct part in my timeline of my growing up after my parents divorced, to where I started to act out. And I feel so dumb for not even making that connection. And I remember whenever I get sent to the principal's office or assistant principal's office or whoever, I would cry. I would cry. I would cry a lot. And, they thought they were like alligator tears. But no, I mean, like, and the thing is, like, I don't even know that I felt bad. One thing that always stuck with me was they would ask, whenever people would ask, like my mom would ask, like, why did you do this thing that you did? And all I could say was, I don't know. And, of course, they didn't believe me, or sometimes didn't believe me.
Fuck, that's still that is still one of my reasons for things now that I do.
Yeah,
I get in trouble at work for it.
Yeah, but like, yeah, I just remember being so distressed because I was like, I don't know, like, I'm not, I'm not sure why I, broke that thing or did whatever I did to get in trouble. And then looking back on it now, I mean, like, was it like starving for attention? Maybe. I mean, to this day, I still kind of don't know. I don't understand little Sebastian. Not the Parks and Rec one. I mean, I don't understand that too. It's just a little horse. But no, me, little Sebastian.
Yeah, we're gonna have a conversation about little Sebastian later. The horse, not you.
Right. But yeah, no, it was. Yeah, I was. I mean, the best thing I can come up with is that it kind of relates to something I had early on in my early 20s as well that I struggled with, which was kind of a lack of foresight, lack of, I didn't plan far ahead into the future, and I didn't do that thing that I always forget the phrase for because I don't practice it a lot, where you put off having something now for a better reward in the future.
Delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification. Thank you. Yeah, so, like, yeah, in fact, I think they just had they just released a big study on delayed gratification recently. And I don't remember it because I went down a rabbit hole of this, and what I found to be even more interesting was this one study, and I'll try to find a source for it so that we can link to it, that essentially found a link between delayed gratification and one's relationship with authority and trust in authority. Essentially, to put it in layman's terms, a bad relationship with authority generally led to this idea of having trouble with delayed gratification, because if you thought you were going to get screwed in the future, you may as well take what you can get now. So that generally was the idea, that, you know, poor relationship with authority, you generally had poor delayed gratification.
It's funny, I feel like I have decent delayed gratification, but I do have a problem with authority. Like, my boss and I have a weird relationship where he is also someone who is definitely adverse to authority, and he knows I am. So it's a strange dynamic, because we also like shit on each other a lot. But it stretches to other authority figures at my work, where if I don't see eye to eye with them, I will just plainly disregard them and do what I want. And I get in trouble, and it's not even because I necessarily know why, and obviously I can't say, oh, because I don't like you as an authority figure. I do it because it is, well, I guess maybe even like a poor practice of delayed gratification, because I don't wait for them to tell me I can or can't. I don't wait for their input. I simply do what I can with what I have, and I go for it, and then it's a 50-50 split when it like goes well or it doesn't. And I kind of just take those as learning opportunities.
Yeah, and looking back at my childhood, it has been kind of eye-opening to see, you know, what I can learn from it, and what I can sort of emotionally move on from. And yeah, a lot of it was the anger, the sadness, this sort of constant concern that the future is very unstable, and accepting that I'm in a very stable situation now. You know, financially, you know, emotionally, relationship wise, job wise. You know, it sounds silly, but even though everything's going okay, when you're growing up and things have traditionally been very unstable, you know, it's hard for you to accept that things are fine now, you know?
It's almost like waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
So,
but why did the first shoe drop?
It slipped.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's where did the first shoe come from?
I don't know. I just I never quite knew.
On the next episode.
Someone could tweet us.
Why and what happened to the first?
That'd be
why
great.
is the first shoe? Oh.
Why is the first shoe?
Deep. So, you know, we're talking a lot about our childhood, and we're talking a lot about us in regards to how we feel the condition. And what I'm learning more and more is that the cause of these conditions is being a child. If I can skip that part, awesome. But I can't. And here we are. We'd have like a whole society of adult children.
I feel like my girlfriend and I are some of the few people that share this view of, man, I really like being an adult so much more than being a teenager.
Definitely. I mean, you can stay up till midnight. I had cereal the other day for dinner.
Yeah.
And that was awesome. Or I didn't, yeah. I mean, there's definitely some perks.
Yeah, for sure. I woke up at like noon today and I had some ice cream. It was pretty good.
I mean, it's no longer breakfast, so it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, also, I work in a retail environment. I'm not a bum. Oh, wait, you guys don't know that today's Tuesday. Never mind.
Well, now they do.
Damn. I'm a bit of a bum.
Every day, everyone has different work schedules. All right. So.
But that's mental disorders or mental concerns for us. You know, we specifically, unfortunately, you know, can't touch on, because of the nature of the show, without making it sound too clinical, we can't really get into like bipolar disorder or dementia or schizophrenia.
Well, we can talk a little bit about it in regards to, you know, what people believe and research says. There are definitely some studies and theories and research that will suggest that there are legitimate chemical imbalances or areas of the brain that are not as high functioning as others, or potentially damaged. I mean, you have, it's patient H or HM. I can't remember his full name. But he was someone who, back in the day, worked at a railroad, or on a railroad, had a rail spike, go through his head. And he was fine. He was fine. He lived through it. Surprisingly, no infections or anything. But the damage done to his brain completely altered his everything. He was unable to hold conversations as long or memories as long, but he also was more irritable, way more than before. He couldn't remember memories. He had anterograde amnesia, where he couldn't form new memories, I believe. And so that goes to show the role that the physical brain takes in some of these disorders. And I mean, at the time, I don't think he was necessarily seen as someone having a disorder, but it did give implications that, hey, what if brain damage can lead to disorders, or vice versa even. There's something called neoplasticity, where we can literally reshape the mapping of our brain, or unknowingly almost. And we do that when we practice emotions a lot. And I say practice because it's kind of a lack of a better word almost, where we allow ourselves to experience these emotions, and then we allow these connections to form. So that's one way to look at it, where schizophrenia, bipolar, dementia is definitely, you can see brain scans of people who had dementia, Alzheimer's, and see brain damage.
Yeah. So
it goes to kind of beg the question, people are going to say, well, is it nature or nurture? It's honestly, I think, both. And it's going to be mental illnesses, conditions, disorders, whatever you want to call it. It's really going to be on you, whatever you call it. It's anything and everything. It's some things, it's nothing. Obviously, childhood has a huge impact. But now we're left as adults to manage the pieces. And what do we do with that? And what do we decide is going to be the thing that dictates that concern?
Yeah. And
that progress as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's part of what we're trying to, achieve here, is letting you know whether it is something, low grade. I'm hoping you feel some validation in hearing that there's somebody else out there who felt compelled enough to go out and seek some sort of treatment for it, and is, by all accounts, a much better person for it. And that there is another side to your anger, to your sadness, to your being alone, not wanting to do things, engage in things. I want, people to know that just because you don't have a railroad spike through your head doesn't mean
you don't deserve a study of your own. Okay. But no, seriously, because that's
kind of a high bar.
There is no level of invalidation acceptable for these things. Yes, we experience things differently, and so objectively they may look differently, but subjectively it's going to feel intense. It's going to bother us to some degree. And if you're worried about going to someone, say like a professional for help, or just, pouring your guts out to someone, try to think of it, and I definitely encourage you to try to think of it as objectively as possible, because going to a therapist, is it really that much different than going to a medical doctor? These people are paid and educated to process this information and help you through it. So definitely, if you're going to go to someone to talk to, it's their job to listen, not to agree or judge or disagree. They're there for you. So whatever that'll mean to you, will you'll figure it out the more you go to therapy, or the more you talk it out. But like the last episode, we definitely did try to emphasize, and I think we did, the level of conversation and involvement that you should definitely consider in your own recovery. So
yeah, but do be careful of when the therapist says that that they're experienced in CBT, because what you're looking for is cognitive behavioral therapy, and Andrew said that they're not supposed to like disagree with you or invalidate you, but there is combative behavioral therapy where they will constantly disagree, try to invalidate you.
No, they
okay.
Well, sometimes. And actually, sometimes they may actually very much feel combative, but they're really challenging you to think outside of the norm.
Yeah. So
mental illness, what is it? I don't know. We should add a disclaimer. If you really want to know what we think, skip to minute so and so. But it's true. I mean, it's going to be a lot of things, and it's going to be so unique that I don't think it's fair to look at things like, return results on Google or the DSM or a textbook to rely on for a accurate diagnosis.
Wow, this.
Because it's right there. Simply because the criteria you'd have to meet to really be depressed is not a lot. Each of these things have about like 5, give or take, points, and all you really need to do is meet like 1 or 2, and bam, you've got it. I remember when I was in my abnormal psychology class, we had a whole section dedicated on personality disorders. I probably was able to tick off quite a few of those. And I would put it to you to go look and read through a DSM, diagnostic statistical manual, and just see how many you can tick off.
It'll be fun.
It'll be fun. And maybe you'll become a pseudo-psychologist yourself and realize all your friends are broken too.
So after clicking on one of my return Google results with the Mayo Clinic, what does the term clinical depression mean? They have a signs and symptoms of clinical depression may include list. And the second one here is angry outbursts, irritability, or frustration, even over small matters. And that is interesting because we often think of depression as sadness. Mm-hmm. You're very sad. Which, by the way, I mean, most people will go through depression at some point in their lives. I think this is not completely understood by people. Yeah, mm-hmm. And there is such a thing as like, after a loss or, of some sort, or like losing your job. I mean, you can fall into a momentary depression at that point in your life. And what I was talking about here of myself is a constant depression despite external forces, but definitely can be triggered by external forces. But yeah, like I said earlier, my depression manifests itself in anger when I was younger. So it wasn't always that I was feeling sad, Well,
fun fact, depression in children, that's more common to be displayed with angry outbursts and disorderly behavior. Whereas, you get teenagers who are depressed and they sulk. Yeah. It's the exact opposite. It just goes to show how it's processed differently at different ages.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, what is a mental concern? What is a mental illness condition? I'm probably going to screw up making it succinct, but essentially for me, it's something that in spite of how things are, everything's going to sound wrong. So I guess I'll just say what's on my mind. In spite of how things are going around you, your mood is sort of incongruent with that. Your thinking, your energy, that's, again, your job could be going well. You can be in a steady relationship. You can be financially comfortable, and you can have a persistent cough, just like you can have a persistent depression. But again, that does kind of teeter on the edge of one of the last definitions that we talked about with mental health, I think by the World Health Organization, where, the good mental health does not mean the lack of a mental disorder, and a mental disorder does not mean that there is a there's not good mental health. Wait, did I get that wrong? I think I got that wrong. What am I trying to say?
Good mental health does not mean the lack of a disorder, and a disorder does not mean the lack of good mental health. Something along those lines.
Actually, that's exactly it. Yeah, just because you're fine doesn't mean that, you may not be suffering from something. And just because you're not, suffering from something doesn't mean that you're necessarily in the best place that you can be mentally.
Yeah.
So that is exactly what I'm trying to say. So, like I said, that's why my personal definition kind of teeters on the edge of contradicting that.
My personal definition is really short, I think, and it's personal just because to me it's discomfort and functionality. Mental illness, that's what that is for me.
Discomfort and functionality.
Mm-hmm. So
that doesn't alliterate quite as much.
Discomfort in doing things.
Why?
Better?
Discomfort and functionality. Might be wrapping up things soon.
Yeah.
Can you, if you don't mind, I mean, it is very short and sweet, discomfort and functionality. But do you mind elaborating on that a bit?
I can say it with anxiety. I didn't feel like I functioned in regards to society, in regards to myself. I felt like I wasn't working, and I wasn't comfortable in that. So that was a problem to me. I mean, it's really that simple. I saw that there was something not comfortable, not right, maybe not necessarily wrong, but I didn't enjoy it. And I saw that it was affecting relationships, interpersonal, external, whatever you want to call it. So something wasn't functioning, and that's kind of how I treated that. That's the short of it. Some people will say like, hey, I'm seeing and hearing things, and that's not allowing me to work. That's, you're not doing your job as a function of your daily living. So that could be a level of discomfort for you. So that's how I see it, just because it lends itself to stretching even further into medical fields, I guess you can say. Like, hey, this broken hip, it's really uncomfortable for me to, walk around, and I can't do my job. So
you ever tried not having a broken hip?
Shit.
Yeah. By the way, that's what that sounds like whenever you do say that to somebody.
Yeah. But there is no light bulb clicking on the other end. So, but short and sweet. What is mental illness? Define it for yourself and let us know. I'm very curious to hear what you would have to say, or how you define it. If you agree, disagree, or want to elaborate on anything or tear apart anything that we have said, go for it. Why not?
Please do.
Yeah, we are by no means experts. We just live with it. So let us know your thoughts. Also, let us know some of the ways you think you can improve. Not just yourselves, but a way of thinking or something. And the reason I say that is because I had this nifty little book that I found. I don't know where or how. And it's called 50 Things to Improve the Way You Live. It has multiple writers. And I want to just read the first one, because I think it'll be nice to have like a little ending on a good note type of thing. Just bear with me.
I'm not saying anything. I've been playing with your cat this whole time.
One thing that can improve the way you live: the apricot harvest in Warschau Valley, Austria. If you think you know what an apricot tastes like, think again. About 83 kilometers northwest of Vienna, in the stunning Warschau Valley on the Danube, apricot trees burst forth with their fabulous fruits come July, and they will spoil you for any apricot you ever eat anywhere else. Expected this year from mid-July to early August, the harvest is an occasion to celebrate and participate. Around the small city of Krems are orchard walks, and Krems' old city hosts a pedestrian zone Marillenfest on the 12th and 13th of July, where farmers sell crates of the perfect fruits on the street, and even the ice cream cones are apricot flavored. Even more idyllic is the medieval village of Dernstein, where apricot preserves and liquors are on offer at Weißer Wauchow all year round.
who is today's sponsor, by the way.
Visa Vosha. The city of, or the valley of Vosha.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for letting us know that we just missed the time frame in which to enjoy those apricots from early July to mid-August.
Just another thing that probably ruined your day.
Yeah. And where did you find that?
I found it at work. Okay. There's no like copyright on it, and I don't know where this came from, but the illustrations on it are great. I think it's awesome because it's like a worldly way to improve life. Like, you know, you can go to New York with one of these tips, or Austria, or apparently have a cool delivery that involves hand signals. I guess careful where you use those. But yeah. The point of this ending is...
I'm waiting.
Develop coping skills, find outlets, and see what works for you to improve your life. Here in Texas, we have a strawberry patch field, whatever you call it, that we can visit to go pick strawberries. If we wanted to. I haven't done it.
Yeah, me neither.
But I'm not a big... I think, like, culturally, I don't want to do it. I'm adverse to going to pick my own fruit. So, yeah. But let us know one of your coping skills as well. At Our Soft Machine is our Twitter handle, so reach out to us there.
And our Instagram handle.
Oh, and our Instagram handle. You know, I don't even know all the ways you can reach us.
So you can reach us on Twitter at Our Soft Machine, Instagram at Our Soft Machine, Gmail, Our Soft Machine Show at gmail.com, YouTube, just search Our Soft Machine. That's where we'll be posting our episodes. Facebook, just search Our Soft Machine. We'll have some updates there. And Zanga. Actually, I don't think Zanga's up anymore.
Oh,
you just mentioned curious. It last time, and
yeah, I'm curious.
No, it's like in some sort of. I'm gonna cut this out anyway.
Well, again, and podcasts, you can listen to us wherever podcasts are available. Mostly iTunes, Google.
We're coming for Spotify. We need 3 more episodes.
Oh, that's right. So we will be there eventually.
Yeah. So hang tight.
Yes.
And hopefully we will be in a good groove by then.
I think we're in a good groove now. All right. Thank you for listening. Check out the last episode titled Conversations, where we start to introduce mental health to us and what we think of it. And I hope you enjoy the conversation about mental illness. You can't have one without the other in a way, sadly. But, you know, our opinions are just that. So again, let us know, and, you know, don't forget to also review and rate wherever you listen. It'll help us out a lot to know what we're doing well and not, and whatnot. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Before we go, I do want you to keep in mind one very important message.
If you or someone you know needs help, call 1-800-273-8255 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can also text HOME to 741-741 for the free 24-hour support from the Crisis Text Line. Outside of the U.S., please visit the International Association for Suicide Prevention for a database of resources.
Keep that in mind. All right, guys. Be well, stay safe, and converse, or whatever. All right. Thank you. My name is Andrew.
My name is Sebastian.
This has been Our Soft Machine, episode 2.
What happened to Stay a Little Crazy?
No.
Okay.